I was privileged in my presidential address at General Synod in 2001 to be able to recommend to General Synod this ministry designation. So that's where it began in June of 2001. It then went through a task force that I co-chaired with Vern Hoffs, and we came back to the next General Synod in 2002 with everything laid out in terms of the standards and the title, Commissioned Pastor. It was approved by General Synod, went to the classes for a 2/3 vote, and the following year was made final and put into the Book of Church Order. It came out of a real need for more people to be in ministry. We had pockets in the denomination, regional synods that were beginning to realize how strong the need was, and they were on their own trying to equip people to be in some form of ministry. We had a lot of upcoming vacancies in churches. We had small churches in rural areas and urban areas who couldn't afford a full benefit package and salary of a fully ordained minister of work sacrament. We had staff members who had worked in churches all their lives but had never had any theological training. We had pastors who had brought whole congregations into the Reformed Church in America, but they came from a tradition where they were not required to go to seminary. And to equip them as commissioned pastors, to give them Reformed theological training was another piece of this. And perhaps what was the biggest passion for me when I made this recommendation was a real heart I had for lay people in our denomination, many of whom spent their whole life giving full service to their local congregation, but never saw any way that that could go any further than the boundaries of their congregation. And to be able to have their congregations identify them and lift them up, and to train them and equip them to go out in ministry. Many of them might be near retirement. They had a good 20 years of their lives they could spend in ministry. So this was a wonderful opportunity to enable people to answer God's call. I think there are legions of people in the Reformed Church in America who have gifts for ministry, and they've never seen an avenue by which they could take that walk, be equipped to have not only the theological studies but the pastoral training that they need. I think it was George Barna who said, "The church has enough people in it already to change the world." And that's my hope and prayer for this denomination, that we take the gifted people that we have, train them, lift them up, and call them into service. Perhaps it would be helpful for me to talk about the 4 individuals that are currently commissioned pastors in my own classes, all of whom come with a variety of very different gifts and different backgrounds. The very first person who became a commissioned pastor in my classes was a woman who was working in Christian education in her church and felt the desire to have more theological grounding. So she went to a New Brunswick Theological Seminary for their Certificate in Theological Studies program. She became enlivened and enriched and excited about what she was learning. And she stayed in her local church. She became commissioned pastor for Christian education there. The second person was a woman who had long felt God tugging and pulling at her. But she had a job, a very successful job, and didn't feel she could leave it because it provided funding for her family. And she had 2 daughters at home, the one rather young. And she prayed to God for years for God to open a way for her to be involved in ministry. And she felt that when we put in place the commissioned pastor designation in the Reformed Church in America, that it was God's personal answer to her prayers. She went to the seminary for the certificate program. She took some additional CPE courses, and she is now serving as a chaplain, the sole chaplain of a facility in northern New Jersey for gravely developmentally disabled adults. She has this great gift for relating to these people, many of whom can't even speak. And I really feel that God intended for her to be equipped to do that. I was the next person to be commissioned, and my story is that I feel that God knew all along what he wanted me to do, but I was clueless. And just doors opened and pathways opened that made it happen. And our fourth one is a wonderful story of an Hispanic congregation within the bounds of our classes. Their pastor left, and he really placed his hands upon one of the lay women and said, "I really feel that God is calling you to lead this church." And so for over 3 years, she was their lead lay pastor, preaching every Sunday, going out into the streets and talking to youth and just caring for the people. She entered the commission pastor route with our classes, and she now has been commissioned. So she serves in the capacity that her congregation already saw in her as pastor, but with the credentials now. I think we limit the Holy Spirit when we don't let God touch people's lives and move them into ministry. I think that applies to every person who sits in a pew in a church on Sunday morning. They are all called to be disciples. Some are called to become commissioned pastors as well. But we have failed to really make our people aware that if you follow Christ, there are pathways and ways to be in ministry that you can't even imagine. I don't think I fully realized what God had in mind, and I think that God meant that it would be an elder who would say, there are elders with a gift for ministry, and the church needs to call them out and equip them. And so I think that's the excitement of it. For me, the sense of the Holy Spirit moved this whole thing along at a pace that in our very tried and true, do everything decently in order denomination might have spent a decade working on. The Holy Spirit moved through us and made it happen much quicker. When the Holy Spirit calls someone into ministry, that they need to have a clear pathway for affordable and accessible pastoral training and theological study. And having the commissioned pastor route in the Reformed Church in America is a way by which the denomination can lay out for them a way for them to equip themselves and then be sent out into ministry. I believe that God gives us nudges in life, and that we have to be quiet enough and sensitive enough to hear them. And so I would say be attentive to how the Holy Spirit is moving you. And if you feel that there's a yearning in your heart to be of service to God, and you have faith that He will find that place and open that place to you, then go for it. Because I can tell you, I grew up my entire life in the church, and when I went for the training for commissioned pastor, the deepening of my own personal theology and the understanding I have of the faith just grew by leaps and bounds. So the training in and of itself just rounds you out as a person of faith at a depth that you don't even understand before you complete it. So I will say to them, this is a journey you don't want to miss.